Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Keep It Science. We are back and with a bit of a twist. This time we are shining a light on rare diseases, from insights from biotech leaders and specialist clinicians to personal stories from the people impacted the most. Now, we say rare, but over 300 million people live with rare diseases. That's roughly about 1 in 20 people face years of diagnostic journeys with limited treatment options and struggle with diseases for the rest of their lives due to a lack of a cure.
I'm Dr. Elisabeth Kugler, and for me this season is incredibly personal. I have myself a rare autoimmune disease, which includes Scleroderma, Dermatomyositis, and Secondary Raynaud, which is called an overlap disease. And so as a scientist and rare disease patient, I hope to contribute insights from both of these worlds in this season.
And I'm Dr. Nick Gaunt, and together with Elisabeth and a variety of guests, we'll explore everything in rare diseases, the science, the stories, the struggles, and most importantly, these exciting breakthroughs that we're seeing every single day. Hello, and welcome back to Keep It Science. In this episode today, we'll be getting an exclusive insight into the relationship of a clinician and his patient. So our guests today are Professor Dr. Francesco Del Galdo, who is the Susan Cheney Professor of Experimental Medicine and Head of Scleroderma Program at NIHR Leeds Musculoskeletal Biomedical Research Center. It's a mouthful for sure, and it's a great title. The chair of the newly launched Scleroderma Forum and the president of EUSTAR. And so, yes, hello to you.
Hello, hi, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I've never been in this sort of podcast forums and I look forward to it. The title is very intriguing.
Yes. With you is Dr. Elisabeth Kugler, who is my co-host of Keep It Science, director at Zeeks, and you are also Dr. Del Galdo's patient.
Yeah, absolutely. So hello and thank you. And thank you, Professor Del Galdo, for joining. And yes, I do have an overlap disease of Scleroderma, Dermatomyositis, and Secondary Raynaud. So it's a mouthful to say as well. So hello and welcome.
Yes, I'm going to struggle saying some of these words later on, I'm sure. And I'm Dr. Nick Gaunt. I'm a science communicator and the host of today's Keep It Science episode. Today we're going to be talking about scleroderma and DM, that are autoimmune diseases that affect connective tissue, blood vessels, skin, and muscle, often in unpredictable and compounding ways. Managing them requires a multidisciplinary approach that balances medical treatment and daily self-management. So, Professor Del Galdo, you're one of the leading UK scleroderma specialists. Could you tell us a little bit about your work and the research that you're doing on a daily basis?
Oh, okay. Yes. So this, as you rightly mentioned, there are a group of diseases that you don't read about much, and that's why they become a mouthful even to pronounce them sometimes. And but they need research like every other single field of medicine. So I moved to this country in 2009 after starting a research career in this field to set up a patient-centered research center in the north of England, joining a good critical mass of research on rheumatological conditions in Leeds. Leeds was already a leading center for rheumatology, but they did not have much scleroderma. So they tasked me with setting up a scleroderma research program, and we started, and we have been very busy in the past 15, 16 years. We grew quite a lot as a group because it's a very exciting time for any immunological fields. Now, these diseases are autoimmune diseases. So there is diseases that are caused by the immune system being a bit of crosswires. Yeah, the immune system is an organ that people fail to picture. Yeah, you can picture a liver, you can picture a lung. They say, what is the immune system? It's a mix of a liquid and solid organ that altogether is almost 10% of your body weight. So it's a very big organ and is at the center of everything we do, including, we've learned, diabetes or cancer, as we learned. But there's this group of diseases primarily caused by the immune system failing to avoid harm to your own body, and it trying to be a bit hyperactive, very similar to what is allergy. Yeah, we have familiar with the idea of allergy, being too reactive to something that we shouldn't. Autoimmune diseases are the same. And so what we're doing, we're learning from our patients, because these diseases, being the immune system so personal, yeah, the immune system is as unique as your fingerprint, actually 3 orders of magnitude more than your fingerprints. So being so unique, these conditions inevitably have a name and a tag, but patients are very different. And so the only way to understand really how to better serve our patients is to learn from patients. And we have been setting up these centers. And as Elisabeth has heard, and the first time she came, every patient is invited to be part of research, and through their participation, we've done strides. Now we start to have blood tests that can help us to stratify. Stratify means picking patients that have higher risk of progression versus others. And that's what I do. And through that, we design better clinical trials, we design better diagnostic pathways, and we help patients to have better outcomes at the end.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you're saying about the fingerprint and the fact that what was the number again? How many times more?
3 order of magnitude more. So the fingerprints are, I don't like to be quoted to the number, but it's to 10 to the 7 to 10 to the 8. Immune system is 10 to the 11th.
So it's incredibly unique. That's so interesting. And so I'm sure that makes part of the challenge for scleroderma and things like that, but what makes it particularly challenging to diagnose and treat?
It's a very good question, Nick. These conditions like scleroderma, dermatomyositis, in general connective tissue diseases, are conditions that most of the time have an incubation time where things start to go wrong, but they are not apparent with a symptom that makes them recognize it. Yeah. So a very common symptom is Raynaud, which is a color changing in the hands, but this is very common. And 1 in 10 people in UK may have Raynaud. And so it's clearly not a red flag for this condition, but we know that all patients with these conditions have Raynaud. They had it for some time. So there are a series of specific symptoms. We just learned from an international study, there are some other symptoms like gastrointestinal, like heartburn, indigestion. Who didn't have heartburn, indigestion once in their life? Or fatigue, yeah? Who doesn't have fatigue? Are both people going through PhDs? They know what fatigue is. So but then when you start to put this thing together, you realize that every patient that ends up with a diagnosis had a bit of a abnormal level of fatigue, a bit different type of heartburn. A Raynaud is a bit different. And so we're trying to learn how to identify these pieces of the puzzle in time to detect these conditions earlier, because early detection is then associated with early intervention. And when you go on and tune the immune system, and that is what we're learning as doctors, to tune it, but not neuter it, yeah? To tune it enough to give better quality of life, but not too much then to make immunosuppressed people. But when you achieve that, it's a life-changing for patients.
It just sounded like you were telling like my diagnostic journey, like literally like that. Because like I was in 2020, I got Raynaud's as the first symptom, and I had really puffy fingers. And from one day to another, I couldn't wear my rings, right? And that was the first thing that I recognized. And then I went to the GP and I was like, there's something not quite right. And my hands are really painful. And they also said like, oh, you're just stressed, because I was just finishing my PhD. And, it was just literally weeks before COVID. And I think everyone was already overwhelmed. And then they said, just relax, it's going to be fine. And then, yeah, I got kind of worse and worse. And during the summer, I started to have fatigue and then gastrointestinal issues. So literally all of that you just mentioned. And then only in December, I went again to the GP, which was like the 4th time. And then they said, okay, there's really something not right. And then they did some like blood work and found like autoantibodies to be high, sent me to rheumatology. And then finally, I kind of got referred to yourself. But it's literally like these unspecific kind of different symptoms. And again, like also my GP at the start just said like, oh no, it's just Raynaud's, don't worry, it's just stress, it's fine. So it's literally just summarizing that diagnostic journey.
Yeah. I wasn't planning to do your diagnostic journey, but yeah, it is common. And GPs are not wrong, because if they take all the patients that go to GP for Raynaud's, 99 out of 100, Raynaud is all they have. So raising 99 false alarm will not be good for patients, for doctors, for the NHS. So part of the work we're doing is to implement algorithms to say, okay, Raynaud by itself, 99 out of 100 is nothing. But then there is puffy finger, then there is fatigue. And so we are calculating this increasing risk until it becomes acceptable to invest £7 for an ANA, which is not 7 million, but it's £7 that if you would do it on 10 million people with Raynaud's in UK, would be a lot of money that is not needed to spend. So this is the research we're doing. And this is true for every screening program. Striking the balance between screening, early detection, and panicking, it's a task, it's a challenge. And for rare diseases, it's harder, but we'll get there.
Yeah, it's a real tightrope, and I really felt what you were saying about fatigue as well. Throughout my PhD, from start to finish, there was a lot of fatigue, but thankfully, Raynaud's was not one of my symptoms of that. It was just a lack of sleep and eating the wrong things.
Yeah, I do that all the time. I teach in medical school in the final year, and these are 24 to 26 years old, ready to become doctors, and all of a sudden they hear about connective tissue diseases and they're all into early detection. And so I say, how many of you are fatigued? And you see most the hands are up, right? And then how many of you have Raynaud? And few hands are up, which is dead on 10% most of the time. And then I said, well, these two things are not enough, but they could be. And so be careful in being alert, but not panicking, because one of the common things of young doctors is to overdiagnose all diseases, right? And I did it myself. So yeah, it's a fine balance to strike. But the new algorithms that we're implementing, also thanks to machine learning and AI, are going to be very helpful. So we're having some very interesting projects that we launch on the back of our research that we implemented in the States for one project, and we're starting in UK, hopefully in 26. So things are moving.
Yeah, that's what we like to hear. This whole podcast is about some of the breakthroughs. And so hopefully we're going to be seeing some of those, and, all of the patients that you're seeing will see the benefits of that. But on patients, I suppose you have so many and they come in for really regular reviews. What can patients do to genuinely help you as a doctor when it comes to a clinical review?
Patients that do not like to speak are patients that are harder to help, and that they help less, because, of course, one of the great advantages that every patient has is their brain. And nobody knows their body better than themselves. So I like to learn, and it takes a bit of experience of navigating the heterogeneity of people describe their symptoms, because there is a lot of half empty, half full cup of water situation. But once you gain a bit of experience, having patients talking about their symptoms is important. So I always do that. Even while we do a physical exam, I keep talking, because you start it's like little shades of color, little nuisances that they have to fine tune what's really happening.
Yeah. And Elisabeth, we heard a little bit before about your journey so far. You're obviously a scientist as well. How do you reckon your scientific background has sort of helped to empower you, or maybe it's even complicated some things in your patient journey?
I was just laughing because obviously I love to take notes and I write down things. And I think Professor Del Galdo will remember my big red folders that I came with. So yeah, I noted down everything because I was so tired and I kind of was so used to just writing down things. And in hindsight, it was really useful to make notes and write down questions and, write down things like my fatigue levels, my pain levels and things like that, because you cannot remember and you're just so tired that you're not really remembering. But I think it was also sometimes overkill because I kind of took myself as my own little experiment almost. I was like, what's my heart rate? What's my weight? Like really to the T. And I think especially at the start, I was like that. I was reading about things, and obviously you read a lot of like negative stories and kind of the horror stories, and you kind of get yourself really into that stress and kind of fear situation. But I did, so 2021, 2022, I was really unwell. And so I just, I really was really poorly. And I think that only 2023, 2024, when I got much better and now really also quite stable, I think now it's all much more relaxed and I'm taking less notes, and I kind of in general have much more like, what can I do on the day? What's my energy levels? And kind of know myself much better. Whereas at the start, I just had no idea, right? And I think at the start, I thought I can do everything and I'm fine. And then I crashed. And then, I just spend weekends, in bed and everything. And yeah, I just really overdid it. And I think taking notes is good, but you can overdo it. And so I think that's my kind of, two sides of the coin of like, it's good. It can be too much, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose it brings to question whether scientists make the worst or the best patients, does it?
Probably the worst.
They're trying to do the job themselves.
Yeah, science they can make a bit of both. Yeah, and then there is scientists, but then the good scientist knows when to report an experiment, what not to report. And at the beginning, as you do when you're a first year PhD student, you report that the aliquots that you've done, the 10th aliquot was a bit less. Then you're not going to report that anymore. You report the headlines, you report the results. And so that's exactly how it happens. When people are detail oriented, and happens a lot with scientists, then you have the big red folder. I tend to read the first 3 lines, which are the main, or I said, tell me the 3 most important ones. But that's fine. It's I could speak now because it's been so many years with Elisabeth. She's a scientist, but it's a fine balance there, because you have a young and clever scientist in this case that all of a sudden needs to cope with something new. And it's something new that is not going to go. And that is an important psychological implication to that. It's something that came uninvited and is staying. And so you need to now cope with something that yesterday was not a problem. And you feel like with the flu, but it's a flu that is not going. And so that's why it's all doctors that deal with chronic conditions learn to cope with the way the patients cope with this thing. Sketching all the different things that are happening is one of those ways, but is usually good, because it's to map what's happening, and then from there, people pick up and go back to their life.
Yeah. And I suppose sort of beyond the medications that are used and everything like that, there's a lot of self-management, and you've touched on that already, that self-management is quite important. But I suppose what kind of role does it play beyond the medicative parts? Then, it's a rather overlooked area.
This is for Liz first, and Elisabeth first, and then I will add. What do you think of self-management? Because of course that's not me.
I think it's the most important thing. And I think it's so overlooked, because that's what you do every day, right? And I think, so for me, the most important thing at the very start was occupational therapy and physiotherapy. And I didn't even know what occupational therapy was at the start, I have to be honest, right? And my first call was like 5 hours, and it was amazing, right? That woman changed our lives. Like, all the little helpers of like a can opener, or like pencil holders, or like, banisters for the stairs, and, all these little things that make your life easier. And especially at the start, I had such hand pain. I couldn't do anything, right? And she was just amazing in like, giving me a million of little tips that just made everyday life so much easier. And over time, we kind of built, lots of little helps, which is great. But also physiotherapy. So I had various different physiotherapists, and it was all about, maintaining strength and kind of rebuilding kind of mobility and things like that. And I think if you don't do it, and you don't do it regularly, then you can have as many physiotherapy appointments as you want, but it doesn't help. You need to do it yourself. And especially like stretching and moving and like kind of mobility of my joints. I think that was the most important thing, and still is. Like, I know if I don't do it for 2 or 3 days, my whole body just goes really rigid and really painful, and that's on me, right? If I say I'm not doing it, because, you know, it's easy to say no, then it's my own fault. And if I do that for 3 days in a row and I'm then in pain, then I know it's my own fault, right? So I can't blame anyone else, which is, you know, good and bad, but it is on me to do that. But it's the same with other things like, you know, helping yourself, like keeping warm, you know, having hand warmers, drinking hot. It's all like these little things that you have to do yourself, or also when to reach out for help. Like for me, my partner was huge help and kind of dragged me through the worst of everything, right? Kind of, he didn't let me die kind of thing. And that was the thing, like he was always there and helped me. And I think obviously for him and our families, everything changed as well. So it's not just about my own management, but also my family, my friends, and them kind of changing their lives as well and saying, for example, if I ring them and I'm like, can you get me a medication or can you bring me to the GP or whatever, they help me as well. And so building that network, I think, is also really, really important part of all of this that is often overlooked, because it's just the patient, right? But it's not. It's all the friends, all the family, co-workers, you know, and everyone who's involved and affected. And especially, you know, if I get unwell, you know, I will ring people in the middle of the night or send emails to Professor Del Galdo, and I'm like, oh my God, you know, I'm in A&E, and, you know, it affects everyone. So it's kind of managing expectations of yourself and others, I think, is really, really important as well.
I suppose a rare disease does impact you most, first and foremost, but I suppose the old adage of, you know, it takes a village, you know, and it really does when you're calling upon people that you really need their help to things. So yeah,
You're right, and this is hidden, right? Because there are some, we use the society to support people that have a problem. If you look at most of my patients, unless unfortunately they are in a very severe and advanced state, you cannot tell. And so, or you need to really focus on something to pick it up. And so this is a sort of a hidden problem that makes this building on this network sometimes harder. Not for this reason is not as important as in any other condition that needs external support. So the external support, I'm absolutely on board. And there is things that we do with employers, because of course some employers are better than others, put it this way, at supporting people through their health journeys. But this is 50% of self-management. The other 50 is really on the person and on what they decide to do. And accepting that, managing the expectation what they're able to do or not. Like patients that were boxers, and only Elisabeth will know how hard it would be to be a boxer with the condition that affects your hand. So, and I can make innumerable examples. Unfortunately, there are some adjustments that need to take place, and accepting that is the first step that then makes such a difference in everything else. So I would entirely agree with Elisabeth, is crucial. And at the end of the day, people like me are called, you know, English is not my first language, as you might guess, and we are consultants. We just consult for your health, and we give tips and advice and prescriptions, but at the end it's your health. So it's very important how people own their own health with the support of the consultants.
Yeah, and I suppose slightly beyond doctors, professors, and everything like that, Elisabeth, you mentioned occupational therapists and physios as well. You know, their roles in all of this have to be shouted about as well. My partner's an occupational therapist, so she'll be loving the shout out.
They're the best of people, seriously. But I think also, and that's really important, is that I'm also European and I live in the UK, obviously, and we're in Leeds. But what I didn't know was that local centres don't really speak to other centres. And that was a huge learning curve for myself, because I obviously go now to Leeds for everything and try to go there for everything. But even my GP, who's local to me, often doesn't have insight into what's going on in Leeds. And if, for example, I go to a hospital, let's just call it in the south somewhere, then they don't have access, right? And that's really, really challenging because they don't have access, and there needs to be like a standardization of those systems talking to each other. Because not just for me as patient, I need to go there and explain to them, this is my disease, this is what I've got, this is what I've do, but also for them to actually have access and see my latest results. And I think that's something that, again, as like a foreigner, that was such like, how can this be, right? Like really being something unbelievable, like a small thing like this, like IT and software being actually a huge problem. Yeah.
That's a big shout out for scientists out there that they want to do a portable health passport. It's doable. All the clinical information, it's less than a Netflix movie as far as gigabytes. So you could really bring it with you anywhere. It could be probably held in the memory of any of our mobile phones. So this is something that just requires the bright mind to do the right project, and it will make a massive difference. So big shout out for the IT geek out there, geeks out.
Absolutely. Elisabeth, you mentioned a little bit earlier about the non-medical management and things like that. And I think one of these things that really makes a big difference is everything outside of this. And you've mentioned it, but are there anything else that you would say is a huge difference to your day-to-day life other than the physios and the...
I mean, in general, I think it's everything, right? Like, I think, and that is also what I at the start didn't want to accept. Like, I thought I can continue, like I was healthy. And like for me, everything changed, right? I had to leave my job at UCL because I couldn't be in the lab. I was physically, like, I was just literally, I was sleeping all day long, right? I was like, in 2021, I slept probably 14 to 16 hours every single day. And then I had naps throughout the day because I just was non-functional, right? And then for me, like, I think my bed has a very special kind of place in my life because I spend so much time there, right? But I think in addition to that, you just spend so much time kind of managing your disease, right? And that's what people don't see. I like, for example, in 2022, I think it was, I had 241 NHS appointments, right? Out of 41 were in hospital. And because half the time I can't feel my legs and I'm tired and everything, I don't drive myself. So my partner has to take time off. And there is, I don't know any employer who's going to support that and say, yeah, that's great, right? And so my partner and myself went into self-employment and kind of built our own companies because we needed to work around this illness, right? And that's something that kind of people don't see. And then you still kind of go to the appointment and you need to prepare and you need to sort out your medication and you actually need to do your physiotherapy and then you need to do counseling and you need to talk to people. And then it is a full-time job, right? And that's, I think, what a lot of people don't see. And when people see you, they see you maybe for an hour and you're like, you look fine and you behave like you're fine, but then afterwards you crash because you don't want to be the person who is the burden or who is difficult or who's in pain. No one wants to be that, right? And so I think a lot of it is also about kind of, for example, with your clinician, having that honesty and saying, actually, I feel absolutely rubbish. Can you give me pain medication or can we do a scan? Or, for example, I don't know, the weirdest of things, like when you can't feel like your arms or, those kind of things that normal people look at you and they're like, are you okay? Kind of thing, right? But you need to be open enough and saying like, I struggle with certain things. And it took me a long, long time to be honest enough about it and say, I struggle with this and this and this and this. And then, you work around it and yeah. But I think also, obviously, COVID was a weird time because I was ill during COVID and then people went back to work and I was still ill. Like for me, it was still I'm in bed. I'm like, I'm not going back to the lab. And then everyone else went back to conferences. And I was like, oh, but I'm not. And I think that's kind of when you're starting to realize that, oh, actually, there's a huge portion of life that is just suddenly, poof, it's gone. And you kind of just have to deal with that.
It's a full redefinition of what your life is. And, it's the epitome of like life changing, isn't it? People, when they say life changing, they often don't mean it, but this diagnosis obviously changed absolutely everything. And I suppose on sort of life changing,
and I was lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I suppose in terms of redefinition, Dr. Del Galdo, did you have a moment in your career where, something's changed, something that redefined the way that you see your role?
All right, that's interesting question. The very beginning, I was immunologist, and I met people with scleroderma at the time where there was the first biologic treatment for rheumatoid that was acclaimed as life-changing. There was this group of people that had nothing. So that was the first moment. And where I left a beautiful place in the south of Italy to go in a very bad place in the South Philadelphia and study this. And then, unfortunately, there are two types of moments that they happen every month. Moments where things start to get better, and you see patients getting back a bit and coming with a smile, and that is the most rewarding. Trying to learn from there, what went well here, how can I make it more? And then there are the opposite, and then unfortunately those happen too every month. And it's a continued reality check on research, because people that research, science is so fascinating that you can easily go through a tangent and decide to study something that is extremely interesting. But every time I have a patient that doesn't go the way I want, and that is sort of a steer to reality. I said, what am I doing? Is it going to help in situations like this? So these are the two yin and yang moments that they affect my daily life.
No, I think for me, I remember I think two things. I think three. One, when I actually was in hospital for heart investigation, and your team was so nice, and I was so worried. And actually, there was a bit of stress of kind of being transferred to an MRI and everything. And one of your staff, he was like, no, we'll make it and everything. And he was so, in this and so energetic and so we'll do it, we'll get it, it will all be fine, Then I just completely burst into tears. And I was just so grateful to actually have a team that cares, I think that makes a huge difference, to have people who care and are interested. And then the other thing was also, I think, when I was really just so poorly in 2022 after all my surgeries and everything, and I was just I just hated life. I was just in bed. Everything was miserable. You were so positive, right? And you said, no, we've got treatment options. This will be fine. We've got this and this and this, and we'll get there, And it really pulled me through, because I was this sentence of there's treatment options. That was such a big thing, because I know a lot of patients don't have that sentence. And I think that became for me the golden thing, there are treatment options. It will be fine. Kind of. Yeah.
Learn that, because there is, I call it the middle of the pool syndrome. Yeah. Where you're swimming, you don't know how far where you can reach for the wall. And the only advantage of being on my side of the desk is that you see people coming through, and so you can offer that. They say, I know where you are now, but I know that you can be in a different place sometimes. This advantage is that you live this over and over again many times a day. But the advantage is that you can see what the person on the other side of the desk cannot see. And so I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. But that is, you're right, it's important.
I suppose staying on this positive curve that we're on now. Professor Del Galdo, I wanted to know about the current exciting things in your research. So we're going to try and end this on a really nice big high, and what the current research landscape looks like. You're smiling, and I'm hopeful that means that there's positivity on the horizon for everybody to be thinking about.
I'm very lucky. It's a super exciting time. So by studying this early detection, by focusing my research on early detection and trying to understand these symptoms a bit generic at the beginning, simply for early detection, we've done is for the non-scientists in the audience. We have studied skin biopsies, blood of people that are in this phase where they have the symptoms, but they don't have a tissue damage yet. Simply to find a biomarker for diagnosis. And we found a lot more than that. We found that in this stage, and this is data presented only 2 weeks ago in Barcelona, not published yet, but they've been presented and you will see them in the papers at the end of the year and next year. We have discovered that in this phase, which we call very early or prodromic phase, there is a yin and yang, there is a struggle. There is one immune system, there is a part of the immune system that is causing damage, and there is another part that is pushing back to homeostasis. So the reason why there is no tissue damage is because there is a counteractive force trying to heal. And so intervening in this stage now is becoming an healthcare intervention rather than a sick care intervention. So by intervening at this stage, not only just diagnosing things very early, but we can give a hand to the right guys of the immune system rather than just fighting the bad guys when they've taken over. And it's a completely new frontier. It's happening. It's happening in Scleroderma, it's happening in lupus, in rheumatoid. The EMA just recognized that. They published a couple of weeks ago a document on Scleroderma where delay of onset has been deemed as a appropriate objective for clinical trials. So now we are finally in this stage where we can design a clinical trial to maintain people in health rather than preventing the disease to progress. And it's super exciting because we have transformed this effort of early diagnosis into a healthcare intervention. And inevitably, the intervention will be milder. Yeah, because you're helping what the immune system is already trying to.
Yeah.
That's what's hot.
It's so exciting. Like, I can't wait to read this. It makes also so much sense because obviously, yeah, your body tries to heal itself. And I mean, I know for myself, obviously medication was a huge thing, but I also know sleep for me was probably one of the major things. Like, yeah, sleep was the main thing.
We're learning, and I did not know to be, and like every discovery, we made few discoveries, we published few things, but the most exciting one are the one you were not looking for. And this I wasn't looking for. I was looking for the biomarkers for early detection. Instead, we found this big biological signature of pushing back the system to homeostasis. Eventually is lost later on. So at one point, there is some switch that says we lost this. And in case of scleroderma, the switch ends up into scarring, like it happens, right? So if we cannot fix it, you box it. And we are detecting that this process now, and we have identified some key biological pathways that eventually we could help. And the clinical trial is a completely new type of clinical trial and has been funded by the World Scleroderma Foundation. It's a platform trial called SHIELD, by the way, SHIELD, and where we will measure time to developing a first clinically impactful manifestation. So there are different type of trials, and we were afraid that pharma was not interested. Instead, we got already a lot of interest. I launched it in Barcelona on June 12, and so yeah, 3 weeks ago, and we already have a lot of interest. It was picked up by EMA. They produced a document only last week. So it's happening.
Fantastic. Well, that was the positive end to this podcast that I really wanted to have. So thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Keep It Science. So
very nice to talk to you both. Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. No, it was fantastic. And thank you too, Elisabeth, for sharing about your story and your journey.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So thank you both again. And if you're interested in learning a bit more about scleroderma, as a patient, you can visit sruk.co.uk, or as a clinician or researcher, you can sign up to the Scleroderma Forum for insights into the latest research by visiting scleroderma-forum.com. To our listeners, make sure to tune into our next episode where we'll be exploring secondary diseases that are often associated with rare conditions and what researchers are doing to find cutting-edge treatments and different strategies. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
This podcast was produced by Keep It Science, a collaboration between Acorn Scientific Marketing and Zeeks Art for Geeks, two award-winning science communication and marketing agencies based in the UK. If you enjoyed the episode and you're thinking about launching your own podcast, whether it's to share some expert insights, tell your company's story, or build market presence, we'd absolutely love to help you create a podcast with outstanding science and production quality.
So drop us a line at keepitscience@gmail.com, find us on LinkedIn, and if nothing else, keep it science.